And one of the warnings that Andrew Yang put out in the 2020 presidential race was this fear of artificial intelligence and of self-driving vehicles, particularly self-driving trucks. He said these are going to be coming by the end of this decade. They're already experimenting with this. They're going to put tens of thousands of truck drivers out of business. And then we're going to see more of this AI enter into regular cars and other parts of society. And people are going to be thrown out on the street with no jobs because the robots are taking over. This is nuts, the way some of this is being portrayed. It's like they're Luddites here, which is the old, back in the early part of the 19th century, the people that were involved with creating, in textiles, were creating all these fabrics. We're doing a lot of it by hand. And then the weaving loom came out that made it a lot more efficient, automated part of the process. And the Luddites started smashing the equipment because they wanted to protect their jobs, not realizing that mass manufacturing of textiles is good for society, and it makes we have more clothing is cheaper, and it frees up a lot of human resources and capital to invest in new technologies to make human civilization even better. But still there's resistance. And now this is coming from the Teamsters, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, this union. And Teamsters you usually think of as the ones that run the unions for a lot of the trucking. My mom was a Teamster when she worked for a trucking company in San Francisco back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And they've got this bill that's in front of the state of California. And I think Gavin Newsom is considering signing it. It's Assembly Bill 316. And this photo that's on my screen shows Teamsters and supporters at a rally in Arcadia, California on September 18th, supporting Assembly Bill 316, which would require a human operator in self-driving vehicles weighing 10,001 pounds or more. So this is for semi-trucks, 18-wheelers. And there's a lot of innovation that's going into self-driving cars, and they keep getting better and better and better. But in California, because the government is so regulatory, and here unions have such huge influence, particularly with Democratic governors and elected representatives, they're about helping that union so they can retain that union for their support in the election. But what does the union want? The union doesn't want AI or self-driving vehicles to take away their jobs. There really aren't their jobs in the first place. But they want to slow down innovation, really not looking big picture, just looking right in front of their nose and wanting to protect those jobs. But meanwhile, the trucking industry has a huge shortage of jobs. Part of the reason that we're experiencing inflation, not only because gas prices are high, but because trucking is so expensive. They're having trouble finding drivers. The drivers that are driving are making a lot more money because of the competitive nature of the business. If they could automate this, there's a potential of huge savings in the industry, which then would affect society at all levels as products are distributed throughout the supply chain. Now, some people say, these are just greedy corporations that are trying to enhance their bottom line. Well, that's true. Of course they are. They're trying to minimize their expenses. But as a result, that's going to make the whole system a lot more efficient. And you might think, wait a minute, you want a computer to control an 18-wheeler that weighs over 10,000 pounds driving down the freeway at 65 miles an hour or more? You got to be crazy. Well, we're not there yet, but we're getting closer. And I wanted to read a couple of comments here from this article. Now, Assembly Bill 316 would, according to those that are for it, would prioritize safety on the road and put the preservation of an estimated 200,000 California jobs before the interest of big tech. Prioritize safety. Okay, let's think about this. Are automated driverless cars perfect? No. Do they still have development that needs to happen? Definitely. They've gotten way better. But when you're calling them out for safety and not looking at the other side of this, I mean, how much problems we have with truck drivers that fall asleep. My stepfather was a truck driver, and he used to drive the line between San Francisco and L.A. And he had one of his good buddies fell asleep driving his semi truck on Highway 5, somewhere near what was it, Harris's Cattle Ranch, there on Highway 5. He fell asleep at the road up in that neck of the woods and drove off the road, and he was killed from the truck driving accident. And there are countless examples like this where trucks get into these big wrecks because the driver wasn't paying attention, because the driver was sleep deprived. But there are other cases where you look at cars in general where people are on their phones, they're putting on makeup, they're having conversations in their car, they're trying to discipline their children while they're driving. Everyone is so distracted. There are tons of those kinds of accidents that occur in vehicles. Imagine if the vehicles are automated. Imagine if they had sensors that could detect traffic, not just crossbound traffic, but traffic coming up along the side, traffic in blind spots, traffic from pedestrians. In my Kona EV, I have my sensors set to maximum. You'd be shocked at how well that thing works with its driverless capabilities. I can be on the freeway, take my hands off the steering wheel, and my car will stay in its lane. And as the road turns, my car will turn automatically because the sensors can see the lanes. And when I back up in a parking lot, it will beep at me when someone is driving by or someone is walking by. It will beep at me when someone is in my blind spot. It will even beep at me when I'm only using one hand on my driver's wheel. It'll demand I put my second hand on it to be more attentive. And this was a car that I purchased in 2019. So this is 2017, 2018 technology. It's gotten so much better. So much better. And they're testing a lot of these cars in San Francisco. And that was one of the comments from one of the people here in the article. And this person, a 36-year-old LA resident, who's, by the way, a UPS driver, had this to say: "I just don't think the technology is there in light of what we've seen in San Francisco. 2 cab companies with autonomous cabs have been plagued with accidents that hold up traffic and block emergency vehicles." Okay, well, first of all, they're always going to bring up, the emergency vehicles, right? Which, are they blocking them? Yeah, they might be. But that's like to ignore all the other accidents that are happening from human drivers that are clogging up traffic and maybe blocking emergency vehicles, which is far more prevalent than these isolated cases of an automated car, which admittedly is in the infancy of its development. But they're not even allowing a lot of this development for trucks to happen in California. These technology companies are doing it in Texas, where they can test these more because the regulation is a lot less, and there's a lot more open space too. So they go on to say, I think it's like autopilot on the airplane. You still need to have a person sitting there in case something comes up. Well, we're going to be getting to the point here pretty soon where we won't even need a pilot in an airplane, because if the computers are controlled, if the transportation vehicle, car, plane, whatever, are controlled by computers, we can make this system so efficient and be able to be far safer than a human driver or a human pilot. I mean, a lot of these cases where planes are crashing, a lot of it's because of human pilots making errors while they're flying. And for sure, with car driving, people are distracted drivers and they're getting into accidents. But the nut part about this is that here we have a case of progress happening where we might have a more efficient model, self-driving vehicles, self-driving trucks, enormous upside and benefits. But you have these Luddites that are opposing it. People that often refer to themselves as progressives, as leftists, as progressives that are fighting progress. It's bananas. And yet this is something that Gavin Newsom apparently is considering. But these trade unions, I mean, they're obviously protecting their union workers. I get that. I mean, that's why they're in business. That's why a trade union exists, to protect those workers. But at what cost? And by slowing down progress? Are they actually kind of preventing our society from moving into a more efficient, more modern, and safer transportation environment? I asked that question. What do you think?